Hello and welcome back to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jake Daly. Today is Tuesday, May 6th. Got a good show for you today. Going to talk a little bit about Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark has signed an extension through 2030. Also going to touch on Jared Curtis, 5-star 2026 quarterback, has officially committed again to the Georgia Bulldogs. As well as we're going to touch on Notre Dame and Clemson. They have reached an agreement to have matchups through 2037. Also going to talk a little bit about Big 12 coaches. I'm going to rank my 10 through 16 coaches. We're going to do a couple days of that. And then make sure you stick around for my last segment. We're going to talk about Rich Rod Round 2 in Morgantown. What could happen at West Virginia? It's a really interesting outlook there. Before we get into anything, though, I just want to remind everyone, this show is all about you. We want to make it as interactive, as exciting as possible. So we love hearing your comments, questions, thoughts, concerns, the whole deal. If you want to make sure you get on the show, one easy way to do that is to use the Super Chat feature. To do that, you can click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your message, comment, question, opinion, hot take, whatever you got. Send it in there, and this guarantees that your message gets on the air, gets read live. It's also just a great way to support our channel and what we're doing here at GSMC. We couldn't do what we do without your ongoing support. We're so grateful to have y'all as a part of our community here. So Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark has officially gotten an extension. All the athletic directors in the Big 12, they're kind of bored. They gave him this extension basically as a reward. The board of directors voted on this, and so he's going to get a 3-year extension till 2030. His deal that was signed in 2022 was a 5-year deal, so it was running until 27. So he's going to get a 3-year extension, and this is a good move for the Big 12, I think. Brett Yormark, he came in at a really, really vulnerable time for the Big 12 conference, right? You had Texas and Oklahoma had just kind of announced that they were leaving. They had officially submitted a bid to join the SEC. So those were your two anchor programs. Those were your traditional blue bloods in that Big 12 kind of old Southwest conference. And when that happened, the Big 12 was really in a rough spot, right? This was a conference that was in very real danger of dissolving, of potentially losing even more members, losing their Power 5 status, just kind of losing all of that privilege and the status, that type of thing, from the exposure, the national attention that Texas, Oklahoma brought. You were losing that. They were a conference that was in very real danger of either dissolving or looking extremely different than they had. However, this was a situation that kind of moved quickly. So a bunch of requiems were written. Mergers were sought with other conferences, rejected by those leagues. There was a bunch of scapegoats that were kind of pointed out. And there was a term, that death rows, that was kind of in rotation in the news at the time, describing the Big 12 then. But this conference was able to stay together. The remaining kind of 8 schools at that time, they were able to come together. They said, yes, losing these 2 brands in Texas and Oklahoma, it really sucks, right? There's no way around it. But on the other hand, Texas really seemed to have a heavy hand in the negotiating table. Were kind of notoriously difficult to deal with from the eyes of the rest of the Big 12. So they get rid of Texas, Oklahoma, and say, hey, we are keeping this conference together. And former commissioner that Brett Yormark took over for, Bob Bowlesby, did a great job in keeping this league together, kind of adding the BYU, UCF, Houston, Cincinnati teams. So Brett Yormark takes over for that. And he really has led two signature moves. So one, he maintained that 4-team expansion and then also brings in another 4 teams. And that also stems from the TV deal that he was able to negotiate right away when he came in as commissioner. Mind you, this was a guy that was a really out-of-the-box hire for the Big 12. He hadn't really been in the college landscape, little experience at the college sports level, but this was a guy that had spent 15 years with Barclays Sports and Entertainment and Rock Nation. So he was hired from Rock Nation. He wasn't a Big 12 athletic director, nothing like that. This was really kind of a bold move from the Big 12 to go with somebody that wasn't in the college sports realm. But he comes in right away, and the first thing he does is go at that TV deal. Early on in his tenure in the summer of 2022, he was able to achieve an early negotiating window with Fox, with ESPN, more than a year before the actual exclusive negotiating window. Then, a few months later, because of that, they're able to nail out a 6-year, $2.28 billion TV deal with media rights. This was really, they jumped the Pac-12 in terms of TV, in terms of revenue from that. And this was a big turning point in the direction of what happened with the Pac-12, right? Big 12 kind of jumped and took their place in terms of getting a new TV deal. The Pac-12 was kind of waiting around. So you had the Big 12 jump here, really solidify itself as one of the power conferences. And then at that point, the Pac-12 is just all over the board. And Yormark goes, hey, we want more teams. We want an expansion. We want to get into that Pac market, right? So especially with the dissolving of the Pac-12, with Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA announcing that they were leaving to go to the Big Ten, you go, we're going to go add Colorado, Arizona State, and Utah, right? You go get 4 former Pac schools, really solidify, put the nail in the coffin, solidifying the end of the Pac-12 as we knew it. This was a huge, substantial move and kind of a chess maneuver from Brett Yormark, able to use that TV deal and the ability of jumping the Pac-12 in line for a new deal to secure former Pac members into his new conference, really solidify the standing of the Big 12 as, hey, they might not be where the SEC, where the Big Ten are, but you look at, they have a lot of solid programs right now. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the coaches later, but this is a conference that at the moment has a ton of star power at the quarterback position, has some really, really great coaching staffs, and just has some historic programs too that they didn't have before, especially with the addition of, look at Colorado's success in the 90s. Utah has had more recent success, but still a really great program there. Arizona State kind of go back and forth. Arizona State won the Big 12 this year. They won the Big 12, got into the college football playoff, and that's a program that they wouldn't have had before. Brett Yormark has done a phenomenal job of keeping this conference together, of helping it maintain its status, especially if you don't look at football too, you look at basketball. The Big 12 is one of the best basketball conferences in the nation. I think it's definitely up there every year. You have programs, Kansas, Baylor, a lot of the Texas schools, Texas Tech. Those are all great schools. And also just TV means more exposure in general, right? Fox currently has the rights to the top Big 12 football game of the week. ESPN is largely the home of Big 12 college basketball. And the Big 12 also announced in the fall of 24 that CBS Sports would televise men's basketball games, and Turner, who, mind you, Turner is losing the NBA in general, so that's a big market, big chunk to fill there for Turner. Turner would also televise 13 football games and 15 basketball games as a part of a kind of a sub-licensing deal between the NBA and Warner Bros. Discovery. So this is all because of what Brett Yormark has done for the Big 12, especially when you look at moving into Turner Sports. That's a really big deal right there. You get TNT. It's a national market. It's obviously known for the NBA, but they're losing the NBA. So who's going to fill that? And that's a really smart maneuver by Brett Yormark. This is something that he has done consistently well throughout his time as the commissioner of the Big 12. The other thing I also think is pretty interesting with this deal is that it's only a 3-year extension, right? But that puts the time right at 2030 for when Brett Yormark is at this point done as the Big 12 commissioner. 2030, 2031. I have said it multiple times in my show. Those are the years to look for potential realignment, potential big shifts in the college football landscape, of could there be a complete restructuring, reorganization of college football. That's something to watch out for. And those are the big years, is 2030, 2031, because the majority of TV contracts are done at that time. Exit fees, buyouts for especially the ACC, those are big turning points, I guess, landmarks in time where this could be easier. So Brett Yormark gets out of his deal in 2030. Could this be a guy that, if college football does reorganize, will he move into more of a leadership executive role across the country? Something that's very possible. And I think that date, the 2030 date, is really interesting in the fact that that's the end of this current extension. But overall, I think this was a great move for the Big 12. This is a guy that has solidified the Big 12 status after a time when it was really a question mark. It wasn't sure what would happen in the Big 12, but they have solidified themselves. They've added teams. They put themselves in a good position to benefit off of the next round of realignment, and a lot of that is due to Brett Yormark. So we're going to take our first break of the show right now. When we come back, going to talk a little bit about Jared Curtis and his commitment to Georgia. What does that mean for Georgia? What does it mean for other programs? We're going to talk about it, though, on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Today is Tuesday, May 6th. Just touched on Brett Yormark's extension as the Big 12 commissioner. Going to talk a little bit now about Jared Curtis and his commitment to the Georgia Bulldogs. But before we discuss and dive into that, I just want to remind everyone this show is all about you. We love hearing from you, your comments, questions, insights, whatever you got. We want to hear it. We want to make this show as interactive, as exciting as possible. One easy way to ensure that your comment, question gets on the air, gets read, is to use the super chat feature. To do that, you can click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your message or question there. This ensures that your message gets on the air and gets read live, and it's also just a great way to support our channel and support what we're doing here at GSMC. We couldn't do what we do without your ongoing support, and we're so grateful to have y'all as a part of our community here at the GSMC network. So, quarterback Jared Curtis, 5-star, has officially recommitted to the Georgia Bulldogs. So, Curtis had committed to Georgia in March of 2024, spent nearly 7 months pledged to the Bulldogs, and then pulled his commitment in the fall, kind of said, I want to look at different schools, explore different options, go take visits elsewhere. But all along, he had said May 5th would be his decision. We've known this for weeks, that this was going to come out yesterday, of where he's going to go to school. Really came down to Georgia, or Oregon, it sounds like. And mind you, Jared Curtis, this is a kid that's number 1 overall quarterback prospect in the 2026 class, according to ESPN. ESPN has him as the number 5 overall recruit in that class. Kid that's 6'4", 225, quarterback out of Nashville, plays for Nashville Christian. A guy that's a really solid prospect. But so he was between Georgia and Oregon, spent time on the phone with both coaching staffs, allegedly on Sunday afternoon on the 4th, and then yesterday, sources said that people in both programs, they had no idea where he was going to go. Even people in Jared Curtis's camp allegedly told ESPN reps that they had prepared 2 commitment videos. They had one for Georgia, they had one for Oregon, before he actually made his public announcement on social media. So even they really did not know where Jared Curtis was going to do, how this was going to kind of all shake out. And this is a big deal for Georgia. So this is a guy that they've really wanted, a guy that has had 7,600 passing yards in his career, over 130 total touchdowns in 3 varsity seasons. 4th ESPN 300 recruit in this class for Georgia. This is a guy that's big framed, 6'4", got a really strong arm, also just an accurate passer, has pretty impressive mobility too for his size. A guy that over his first 2 years had 5,100 passing yards, 52 touchdowns, only 17 interceptions. Last fall, he was a junior, had another 2,800 yards, threw for 40 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. So improving that accuracy, improving that decision-making as he becomes a varsity starter again. This is a kid that's an impressive quarterback. Also led Nashville Christian to the Tennessee Division IIA state title. And then he's also pretty solid on the ground. 1,600 rushing yards in his career, 38 rushing touchdowns, which I think is really impressive, especially when you consider his frame. Oregon, now, it seems like they're probably going to have to pivot. I would think they probably are going to turn their attention to 4-star quarterback Ryder Lyons. He's the number 50 guy in the ESPN 300, but a guy that they really like, seems to be really high on pretty much everybody's board across the country. I think he's kind of ranked a little low, just considering the hype I've heard around him. But he's also a guy that's going to be a 2027 quarterback pretty much, because he's going on an LDS mission trip after he graduates, so essentially a 27 quarterback. But Oregon, BYU, Michigan, they're all kind of front runners for Ryder Lyons right now. Ole Miss is still in the mix there too, but if you look at those schools, USC, they picked 4-star Jonas Williams over Ryder Lyons first. Michigan just picked up Brady Smigel. BYU, they are under serious consideration. Still kind of feels a little bit like a long shot. And then reportedly, Ryder Lyons loves the Ole Miss offense, but there are still some hurdles there, which makes sense, especially when you consider Ole Miss is really targeting four-star Landon Duckworth right now, it sounds like, who had his eye on Georgia, but Jared Curtis is obviously going there, so not going to go to Georgia anymore. Probably the guy that's going to end up at Oxford and Ole Miss. My question here, if you're an elite quarterback prospect, why are you going to Georgia? It doesn't make sense. Let me go down the list. So yes, obviously Georgia is a very successful program, probably the most successful in the past 5 years. But let's go down the list of, first, we'll do top ranked quarterback recruits from Georgia. So Justin Fields in 2018 was number 2 nationally. He transferred after a year, went to Ohio State. Was obviously a first-round pick, but all of his success was from Ohio State. Jacob Eason, 2016, a guy that was number 4 nationally, but a guy that bounced around, transferred multiple times, never really found his footing anywhere. Brock Vandegrift, 2021, number 34 nationally. Never played at Georgia, got beaten out, started for Kentucky this year, didn't play great. Jake Fromm, 2017, was number 51 nationally. Right now, this is the most successful guy in terms of running the Georgia offense, team success, but still, as an individual, not super successful. And then you have, once you go back to Matthew Stafford, who obviously was pretty much a 5-star quarterback. That's kind of the outlier, though, is Stafford, and then that's about it. Look at their draft history from Georgia quarterbacks. Stetson Bennett in 2023 was a 4th rounder. Jake Fromm, 2020, 5th rounder. Aaron Murray was the next quarterback that was drafted in 2014, 5th rounder. And then you have to go back to Matthew Stafford before Aaron Murray in 2009. It was the first overall pick. But so basically, since Matthew Stafford, there have not been any successful quarterbacks in the NFL to come from Georgia, right? Yes. So I guess if your goal is to win a championship in college, sure, right? Obviously, Georgia's a great place to do that. National contenders, stacked roster across the board pretty much every season. But if you're an elite quarterback and your goal is to eventually go to the NFL, get the best training, experience, just building up process as a quarterback to try to become an elite quarterback prospect to make that jump to the NFL to the next level, why would you go to Georgia? It doesn't make sense. Look at the history of it. And then look at what's happened under Kirby Smart, too, right? Yeah, he had Fromm, but he still played Fromm, still chose his experience over a much more dynamic Justin Fields. Justin Fields obviously played a little bit freshman year, but then transferred. Then you have Fromm. Then you have Stetson Bennett, who was a former walk-on, who, yes, he won games there, but it's a guy that's not going to be an NFL starter. Carson Beck could eventually be he's going to be drafted next year, most likely. But now he's at Miami, and if he does really well this year, it's kind of going to be like Cam Ward, where people are going to remember him for what he does at Miami. They're not going to remember him as a Georgia quarterback. And if he flames out, then he'll probably be remembered as a Georgia quarterback. But if you look at just that success under Kirby Smart, why would you go to Georgia as an elite quarterback prospect? It doesn't make sense. Your pedigree-wise, it doesn't look likely that you're going to be able to get to the NFL, or at least get to the NFL in that aspect, capacity that you want. So why do it? Why risk it? Especially if you're Jared Curtis and the other school you're looking at is Oregon. Look at what's happened with Oregon under Dan Lanning. You had Bo Nix come in. Bo Nix, who, after his Auburn career, I would have been surprised if he got drafted. Bo Nix comes into Oregon and is a first-round pick and now had a really successful rookie season. Dylan Gabriel comes in, gets drafted in the 3rd round as a 24, 25-year-old. So if you're Jared Curtis, you have Georgia, who hasn't produced an elite quarterback in 15 years, essentially, since Matthew Stafford, at least in terms of getting to the next level. And then you have Oregon, who has had Bo Nix, who has another guy, their last starter got drafted. It's an exciting offense, and it's an attractive offense. Why would you go to Georgia over Oregon or over another school where they prioritize quarterback development a little bit more? I don't really think it makes a lot of sense if that's your ultimate goal, right? If your goal is to go win a national championship, have a really successful academic career, like team success, if that's what your goal is, sure, Georgia's a great place to do that, right? Georgia, they're not going to drop out of the national conversation anytime in terms of winning a national title, winning the SEC championship. That's always going to be up on the board in the conversation for the Georgia Bulldogs. But if you're an elite quarterback, why do it? It doesn't really make sense. It's not going to help your career. And maybe Jared Curtis is one of those outliers. It's very possible. He could be similar to Stafford, where this is kind of the outlier. It's an elite quarterback for Georgia. But looking at that history, it's more likely than not that that's not going to be the case. Or he might have to transfer elsewhere in order to really reach that full potential. Those are just some of my kind of questions about that decision. But from an on-field perspective, at the minimum, this gives Georgia a really great depth piece, a long-term quarterback solution, and a guy that could step in and eventually raise the ceiling of that Georgia offense. But will it help his career in the long term? I guess we're going to find out, though, and we're going to see what Jared Curtis can eventually do as a Georgia Bulldog. So we're going to take our second break of the show right now. When we come back, going to talk a little bit about Clemson, about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and their new deal securing that matchup for quite a while. So stick with us. We'll be back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Just had a little rant about Georgia quarterback Jared Curtis committing there. I don't know. I don't think it's a great move from his perspective of long-term NFL prospects, but we're going to find out. Going to talk now a little bit about Clemson. Notre Dame have announced a deal where they have solidified that matchup through 2038, actually. 2037, 2038, right around there. This is going to be a 12-game home-and-home series. I love this from both sides of the aisle. So consider the two teams, they were already scheduled to play 5 times during that window of time. So the announcement basically just means 7 additional games between the Irish, between the Clemson Tigers. A big thing I think here is this is a scheduling counterweight for both programs, as the Big Ten, the SEC, they're discussing a potential intra-conference scheduling agreement where those two conferences would have more matchups together. Also, the SEC is considering moving to a 9-game conference schedule. And so right now, Clemson is scheduled to play, obviously, South Carolina in a rivalry game every year, but they also have future home-and-home series against LSU in this upcoming season and 26. Georgia, they have 4 years of a home-and-home series, and then Oklahoma, right? So they have those three games. And if there is a 9-game SEC slate, that could put some of those future matchups in jeopardy. I don't think Clemson, South Carolina is not going to go anywhere. That's kind of similar to Georgia Tech, Georgia, where it's ACC, SEC, but those are annual rivalries, in-state rivalries. That game's not going to go anywhere. But it's very possible that the Georgia series, the Oklahoma series, could potentially be canceled down the line if the SEC does move to a 9-game schedule. So in that case, this really solidifies Clemson, Notre Dame, kind of preparing for that potential of the SEC moving to a 9-game schedule. They have an annual matchup with each other that's kind of going to solidify a quote-unquote marquee matchup for both schools. And so even if Clemson's home-and-home series, they all kind of stay on the board, this is just another matchup that it's a counterweight. It helps balance out that impending SEC Big Ten agreement if there is kind of one happening. And also just the potential changes, it would mean there's more marquee matchups. And SEC or ACC is also looking at kind of changing the scheduling right now. So Notre Dame's agreement with the ACC, they have to play 5 games against ACC opponents. The Clemson games are expected to count towards that 5 games per year kind of average, but this is also expected to be at least discussed this upcoming season, this upcoming summer, where the ACC, they're going to want to try to change this, adjust it a little bit, to include also more frequent games with bigger brands like Miami, Florida State. So when the Irish originally signed and entered this kind of agreement with the ACC in 2014, one of the stipulations was that Notre Dame would not play Clemson, Miami, or Florida State all in the same season. So it's kind of been 1 year they play Miami and Florida State. 1 year it's Miami and Clemson. 1 year Clemson, Florida State kind of thing. Just in terms of limiting those big brands, I guess, getting the ACC's smaller teams more exposure. But so now, if you look at it, Notre Dame has put themselves in the position to potentially play Alabama, Clemson, Florida State, USC, and Texas all in the 2029 season. If everything shakes out the way it's scheduled right now, they could play those 5 teams all in 2029. Even more marquee matchups, big-time exposure. And also, this is a series that has really become a rivalry, I think. The first game against Clemson as a part of this agreement was that 2015 game, the Bring Your Own Guts game, where Dabo Swinney captured everybody's attention, called their 2-point win over Notre Dame in a downpour. He said this was a Bring Your Own Guts game. It kind of helps set the stage for Clemson's rise as a college football playoff contender. That was their first ever college football playoff appearance. And then the series has just gotten better, gotten stronger as I think it's gone on. 2018, obviously Notre Dame they both make the college football playoff. Notre Dame gets blown out 30-3 in the semifinals to Clemson. But then you have 2020 season, where that's the year Notre Dame is actually playing in the ACC that year due to COVID, played all ACC games, actually won the ACC in the regular season, and they played in the regular season. They upset number 1 Clemson at the time, had field storming, and then Clemson comes back later in the year, beats the Irish. It's a great series, and these are 2 successful programs, right? If you look at since 2015, Clemson has made the college football playoff 7 times, 2 national titles in that time span. Notre Dame has made it 3 times. Obviously had that blowout loss in 2018, but almost won the national championship this year, got to the college football playoff final, and we're going to see. It's less clear what these games mean for kind of inclusion in the college football playoff. Notre Dame made the playoff last season pretty much without a marquee win. Texas A&M, it kind of appeared to be one at one point. They walked into Kyle Field week 1, beat the Aggies. That was kind of one. And then Clemson almost kind of skirted in. Weren't really in contention. It was really Miami, SMU for the ACC all year. And then they earned a bid by winning the ACC title. Kind of right at the end of the season, snuck in. But so this is just a good deal, I think, for both teams. The other thing here that's really interesting is because of the ACC's new agreement of revenue sharing coming out of the settlements with Clemson and with Florida State, this is going to pay teams that have better TV ratings more money. They're going to get more distribution of the revenue that their media contracts earn. And so for Clemson, right, you have a yearly matchup against Notre Dame. That's obviously going to drive TV ratings. That's a big-time matchup, especially when you look at the other ACC teams. They're going to want to play Notre Dame now because of that, because of the fact that if they have higher TV ratings, they're going to get a larger share of their revenue. Everyone's going to want to play Notre Dame. So for Clemson, this is a major advantage to have Notre Dame locked up every season for the next 12 years, essentially. And also for Notre Dame, this ensures that they have a marquee matchup on their schedule each year, as if they try to maintain their status as an independent, which I think that is what they're going to do. Notre Dame is not going to join a conference until they're forced to, until they absolutely have to, until that's the only choice they can make. So this gives them a marquee matchup to kind of help try to maintain their status as an independent. Because what could happen with the SEC going to 9 games, interconference games, if the Big Ten does something similar, could they kind of get frozen out of some of those other matchups? It's certainly very possible. But at least with this agreement, Notre Dame locks up Clemson for the long-term future. And for Clemson as well, you get that marquee matchup every year. TV ratings wise, this is a game that's going to draw a lot of eyeballs, so it's going to help you in terms of revenue distribution, and it kind of gives them a leg up on the rest of the ACC at this point. Like I said, this is going to be a big time topic for ACC leaders throughout the summer, throughout probably the next couple of years, of how they're going to deal with Notre Dame, what's going to be the TV deal, who actually gets to play Notre Dame. Because currently, in the ACC, Notre Dame only plays Stanford annually besides this Clemson deal. But Stanford has been a long-term rivalry for the Irish. Other ACC schools are going to be jumping at the chance to play them. Florida State Athletic Director Michael Alford, he's already said that he would have no problem playing Notre Dame more than the 5 times that they already have scheduled through 2037. And then Miami Athletic Director Dan Radakovich, he kind of said the same thing. He said brands need to play brands. He mentioned Catholics versus Convicts in '88. So those big programs, they're already trying to jockey and put themselves in position for the chance to play Notre Dame. We're going to see kind of how it all shakes out. I wonder what the ACC is actually going to do in terms of how they determine who gets to play the Irish, especially because of the new TV ratings distribution system. these smaller ACC programs, you look at a team like Syracuse, they're going to be chomping at the bit to try to play Notre Dame because that's a game that's going to draw a lot of viewers and bring them in more revenue. So that's going to be a big part of this, a big component of what's all going to happen is how the ACC will kind of determine who gets to play the Irish, but at least for both of these programs, this is a really strong deal and helps solidify this new rivalry, I think, as one that could potentially really grow into something in both the short and the long-term future. So we're going to take another short break on the show. When we come back, going to talk a little Big 12 and their coaches. I'm going to start ranking Big 12 coaches. We're going to start from the bottom, go about 16 to 10 today, and this will be a multi-day segment, but going to start that today, get into that a little bit, and we'll be back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Just talked a little bit about Notre Dame, Clemson, where that rivalry could go. Going to switch gears, talk a little bit about the Big 12 right now. And this is going to be my rankings of the Big 12 coaches. There's a lot of really good coaches in this conference right now. And I honestly had a lot of issues trying to rank them, through all of them. But so right now I have in the last position Scott Satterfield from Cincinnati, head coach of the Bearcats. And this is not bashing on Scott Satterfield, but it's just the state of the Cincinnati program right now. Took over for Luke Fickell. Kind of appeared that he had things going in the right direction last season for Cincinnati. They started out 5-2, ended up losing 5 straight games to end the season. And this is an era that hasn't been super impressive since he took over at Cincinnati. Only 8-16 in the past 2 seasons. Hasn't really been able to kind of recapture the same success that he had at Appalachian State. And then this is still going back to what happened at Louisville. He obviously was replaced. He was hired away from Louisville, but didn't have a strong kind of tenure there either. I think this is a guy that really needs a bowl game appearance to buy himself another season. If they're a 5-win team, 4-win team again next year, I think it's very, very possible that Scott Satterfield is gone from Cincinnati. Since he kind of in a tough spot, they obviously jumped up from the American to the Big 12, so had a little jump in competition. They face Ohio State for a lot of the premier in-state talent, but I think this is a place that could be doing better, and a lot of it probably falls on Scott Satterfield and kind of just what's happening with his coaching staff. And I think at 15 right now is got to be Scott Frost. Returning to UCF, the big question, can he recapture the magic that he had in his first tenure there? 2017 led UCF to that dramatic, perfect season in which they won that bowl game, declared themselves national champions, then left for Nebraska, which was essentially kind of his dream job. He had been the starting quarterback at Nebraska on that 1997 national championship team, and then had a really rocky 4+ seasons there. Ended his tenure in Lincoln with a 16-31 record, kind of really struggled with game management decisions. They had an awful record in one-score games. It was like 5-22 during his tenure. So just wasn't making the correct decisions when it came to crunch time. Had a couple decisions that really cost him games. When you're going 5-22 in one-score games, that's a pretty big issue. And a lot of the times that falls back on coaching, because there's only so much players can do in that situation. A lot of that is game management, coaching decisions that play in and factor into one-score games. Now, going back to actually UCF. UCF, this is a team that has also struggled since they've been in the Big 12. 5-13 conference record the past 2 seasons, but a program that is really investing in football. This is, in terms of enrollment, this is the 3rd biggest public school in the United States in terms of undergrad enrollment. Not hurting for financials there. They're building a new stadium. They're going to invest pretty much all of this $20 million in football in terms of revenue sharing. So it's going to be up to Scott Frost to kind of determine UCF's success, but a program that hasn't had a lot of success the past couple of years, and a coach that hasn't had a lot of success dating back to his last time as a head coach. At 14, I think it's probably going to be Brent Brennan from Arizona. Brennan inherited an Arizona team that had won 10 games in 2023, retained star quarterback Noah Fafita, as well as Ted McMillan, who ended up being a first-round pick in this year's draft. Arizona was kind of expected to contend for a Big 12 championship this year. Instead, lose 7 out of their last 8 games, finish 4-8 on the season, really kind of fumbled the keys to what was a good situation under Jed Fish, who left for Washington. It's really kind of hurt Brennan's position with the fan base. He's going to start the season on the hot seat, despite only being there really for 1 year. The fact that Arizona was so highly regarded going into this last season and then finished so poorly, as well as Arizona State, their in-state rival, killed it last year. They won the Big 12 and just had a great season overall. So when you compare that to what happened at Arizona, that's going to put a lot of pressure on Brent Brennan, and it's going to be up to him to really kind of change things around after a year that was super disappointing. I also think that at 13, I have Dave Aranda right now from Baylor. So this is an interesting situation, right? Because 2021, Dave Aranda's there. Baylor wins the Big 12 championship. But then 22 isn't a great season. 2023 was awful for Baylor. Went 3-9, really completely looked lost. Dave Aranda is a defensive guy. Their defense was terrible that year. So he honestly almost got fired during that time. And it wouldn't have been a decision that was questioned, but Aranda's gone back to calling the defense, hired Jake Spavital to kind of man the offense. So they turned it around a little bit last year. Went 8-5, had 6 wins in their final 7 games. And this is going to be the key this year, is maintaining the success. He has starting quarterback Sawyer Robertson coming back, has a couple different pieces. But this is a guy that has yet to finish over 500 in back-to-back seasons in Waco, Texas. So a guy that I think has the talent, just needs consistency from a year-to-year basis. That's really the big question mark here with Dave Aranda, is how consistent can you be? Can you win in back-to-back years and not have this crazy turnover every single year? That's going to be the big question mark for Baylor. But like I said, they have their quarterback returning, have a couple big pieces returning. If he somehow falls under 500 again, I think this is, again, a situation where we could see Dave Aranda really being on the hot seat this upcoming season. At 12, this is a guy that I wasn't really sure where to place on this list. From prior success, I think he probably deserves a little bit higher, but this is a position and a university where it's a lot of question marks. I think 12 right now, just looking at the Big 12 kind of layout, is Rich Rodriguez from West Virginia. So West Virginia, they're obviously hoping to bring back Rich Rod, revitalize that program, had some success in the 2000s. I don't want to talk too much about him because I'm really going to dive deep into Rich Rod on my next segment. But a guy that went to Michigan, had a really rough tenure at Michigan, bounced around a lot then after, but revitalized his career the past few seasons at Jacksonville State, where he guided them into the FBS levels, captured the Conference USA championship in 2024, and now gets another shot to kind of revitalize a West Virginia football program that has been struggling. So Rich Rod, I think that's going to be an interesting situation of how it all shakes out. I don't want to dive into him too much because I'm going to talk about him in a few more minutes. So then at 11, and this is a guy I really like, but I think the pedigree of some other coaches kind of pushed him down my list. I think Willie Fritz out of Houston is the number 11 coach in the Big 12 Conference. And this is, I will say, there wasn't a lot for Willie Fritz to kind of work with in his first season at Houston. Cougars went 4-8 this past year, but there were a couple positive signs that should hopefully give some indication of this thing maybe turning around. Willie Fritz also, he's got a track record of turning teams around. Look at his success with Tulane. They really, from the time he was hired to where Tulane has ended up now as really one of the top group of 5 programs pretty much year in, year out. Most of that is due to Willie Fritz and his coaching there. So I think this is a team in Houston program that could really be in the right direction, on the rise. But again, they're 5-13 since joining the Big 12. Like Cincinnati, like I'm blanking on the other one right now. UCF, jeez. Like Cincinnati, like UCF, who they came into the conference with, they haven't really had a ton of success in the Big 12, 5-13 in conference play. But I think this is a program where Willie Fritz can really get it on the right track. And I think I'm a little higher on him than some of the other coaches, but I'm just ranking this more based on pedigree and what's kind of happened at Houston so far. And then at 10, this was a guy that was really all over the board for me. I had no clue, even more so. I think Deion Sanders is the number 10 head coach in the Big 12. In terms of actual coaching ability, this is kind of what I based my list on primarily is, I think, actual coaching ability. I think a lot of his success was probably based on Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, and that's what we're going to see here. This year is really about what Deion can do as a head coach when he's not coaching his son, when he doesn't have one of the best players ever in terms of all-around play of college football, and defensively, offensively, and Travis Hunter. You're not going to have that. You're not going to have your son as your quarterback. What's he going to be able to do? In Colorado, I will give him a lot of success. Colorado was doing nothing before Deion Sanders came. Completely revitalized that football program. So I will give him that success. Had 9 wins last year. They hadn't had 9 wins since 2016. So at least some of that has to be due to Deion Sanders. I'm just a little more hesitant on how much of it was based on Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders being his quarterback. But this is a guy that I think is a strong coach. He's still learning as a coach. But a guy that is still going to recruit really well. The allure of playing for Deion Sanders is really strong. And kind of the culture that he's built in Colorado is really impressive. You have to give him props for revitalizing and turning the Buffalo program around. Definitely gives them a much better chance to win than they've really had in the past 15, 20 years. So I'm just not sure. Will that carry on through the season and beyond for Deion? We're going to have to wait and see and kind of see how that shakes out. So we're going to take our last break of the show right now. When we come back, going to talk about a guy I just touched on in Rich Rodriguez. What's going to happen with round 2 in Morgantown? Really interesting situation going on right there right now. So we're going to dive into it when we come back on the GSMC College Football Podcast. Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. Just touched on Big 12 coaches. Going to talk about one of them in particular, in Rich Rodriguez. Round 2, West Virginia. This is so far a really interesting turnover in West Virginia. Replacing Neil Brown, Rich Rodriguez coming back in. This is a roster that has churned at a ridiculous pace. So the only constant right now is the fact that there's been change. That's really the only thing that's constant about this West Virginia team at the moment. A total of 36 players, 24 of whom were previously on scholarship, have exited the football program following spring football, kind of aligned with the comments of coaches throughout the spring. Rich Rod had at one point said something about their having to cut their walk-on guys with concerns about the roster limit. There was also a story at one point, Rich Rod banned TikTok for the players at West Virginia, which was just kind of an interesting little tidbit there. So 36 guys gone from this roster, and then they've been super aggressive backfilling these roles. So they've already made 23 additions, have had 21 transfers, pair of junior college guys as well. Literally have had added people at pretty much every single position on the football field. Essentially almost every spot on the roster. Kind of stuff that Rich Rod has said throughout the spring of, we don't have anybody solidified pretty much. So since Rodriguez took over the program in December, they have added a total of 52 transfers. 3 of those have left, so I guess you go 49, right? But still, 49 transfers, which is insane, especially when you think about, I talked about Stanford last week, and Stanford, their university, brought in 57 transfers in terms of students, not in terms of athletes. The entire university at Stanford, there were only 57 people to transfer in at one point. So you have that compared to West Virginia, where Rich Rodriguez has added 49 transfers. Pretty much half of his roster. You look at the various positions where the coaching staff has added 2 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, 9 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, 11 guys on the offensive line, 2 defensive linemen, 6 linebackers, 5 safeties or nickels, and then 7 cornerbacks, Oh, yeah, and 2 specialists, too. That also doesn't even include the 5 junior college guys and the 8 freshmen who weren't recruited by the Neil Brown coaching staff. So a total of 63 new players at this stage for West Virginia. Work isn't done. And Rich Rod has kind of said this throughout. There's a couple guys that I think are pretty solid pickups for them. Cam Vaughn was a guy that spent 2 years at Jacksonville State, actually started as a quarterback, but became their wide receiver, was their top pass catcher last season, had 50 catches, 800 yards. A guy that should give Rich Rod a big option outside to work with as a wide receiver. Still has 3 years left of eligibility. Then another guy they brought in was Michael Coates, first team All-Mountain West in 2024 at Nevada. Had 41 tackles, 17 passes defended, 4 interceptions. Had elite coverage grades, so a guy that could be a really big cornerback for them as well. Jordan Scruggs was also a guy that committed to West Virginia. He had a bunch of different offers in the portal. This was a kid that was a nickelback, had 70 tackles, and a pick for South Alabama in 2024. These are those are 3 of the kids that they brought in. This was a really interesting roster pull of how Rich Rod has kind of gotten his guys. There's a couple D2 guys, a lot of community college guys. Obviously, a good chunk of Jacksonville State guys came with him, but they're from all over the board. Rich Rodriguez and his staff, they're really not focusing in on one particular area. They're just looking at overall improvement of this team. This was a West Virginia program that has needed a reset. So in the past 6 years, under Neil Brown, they'd only won more than 6 games 1 year. They won 9 in 2023, but that's a far cry from some of the success that West Virginia has had just in the past, in this century, especially when you look at Rich Rodriguez's first tenure as the head coach there. Extremely successful, won at least 8 games from 2002 to 2007. That best stretch was from 2005 to 2007. They won 10 plus games each year there. He won 4 Big East titles in 5 seasons, won a Fiesta Bowl, won a Gator Bowl. But this was a West Virginia program that was always in contention. They were talked about nationally. And then even after Rich Rod left, they had some periods of success. You know, when you had the Geno Smith era where they had a couple teams that were really solid with Tavon Austin there, Will Greer, some of those West Virginia teams, they were pretty decent, but hasn't had that kind of sustained success since Rich Rodriguez was the head coach. He is obviously kind of taking a page out of the Lane Kiffin book, I guess, here, and just turning over that roster completely. We're going to see kind of how it happens. I wonder how chemistry is going to work here, especially when you have a locker room that pretty much half of the guys left and have been replaced. That's going to be really interesting to look at. But Rich Rodriguez, I think this is a good landing spot for him at going back to West Virginia. How he kind of left, that was still a sore spot for a lot of Mountaineer fans when he went to Michigan in 2007. But this is a guy that has had success in Morgantown before. Just what's the question mark now is NIL, transfer portal, trying to build that West Virginia program in a new era, and you're in a different conference. You're in the Big 12, used to be in that old Big East, but different era. Could there even be more realignment coming? That's all stuff that Rich Rodriguez is going to have to navigate that weren't questions or weren't even topics or ideas during his last time at West Virginia. So Morgantown is a unique place. Will he be able to have success there while incorporating all these other principles, ideas, tactics that come in the college football landscape in today's era? That's going to be the big question mark. Will he kind of be able to replicate that success, or is this going to be a program where they're going to struggle? This round 2 isn't going to work out, and Rich Rod is just going to build up even more ill will with the Mountaineer fans, that's also certainly very possible too. But this is a guy that has revamped his coaching career, really rebuilt his reputation, especially at Jacksonville State. And I think he's learned a lot too, just since he last left West Virginia. Will he be able to bring those lessons back to Morgantown and incorporate them, make them a more successful program? But it was clear West Virginia needed a reset. Rich Rod is definitely bringing that in terms of you overhaul half the roster. So that's certainly a reset. Will it be a good or bad one? We're not really sure. Gonna have to find out and just wait and watch and see what happens this season in Morgantown. So that's going to be all for our show today. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast. Please remember to subscribe, like, follow the channel. If you want, you can also go to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter for more sports content updates that you'd love. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to